a 1-minute response. There may be questions that warrant a longer response time, and if that's the case, I will notify candidates in advance. The first half of the evening, candidates will be responding to written questions that have been submitted in advance by email earlier tonight. The second half of the evening, members of the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions from the floor. You will have 30 seconds to ask your question. This is not the time for commentary. This is not the time for history of what happened the last 20 years. Please come to the microphone with your question at hand. You have 30 seconds. If you don't get it in 30 seconds, that's it. They'll respond as best as they can with whatever information you've given them. I highly encourage both members of the public and candidates to be respectful and focus at the task at hand. An informative and interesting evening learning about candidates and their party platforms. Please refrain from making personal attacks. They will not be tolerated. Speaking order has been determined in a random drawing. I'll be rotating the speaking order throughout the evening. In lieu of opening remarks, we supplied the candidates with a question in advance that was provided by the media. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond. So with that, we'll start with the opening question. Much has been written and said over the years about the centralization of power in the Prime Minister's office and the declining ability of MPs to influence national affairs. Along with that is concerned the government is becoming less and less transparent, with the tight restrictions being placed on what and how is to be communicated to the public. What would you and your party do to address these concerns if voted into office? And we'll start with Patricia.
During Senator Mike Duffy's trial, details about the inner workings of the Prime Minister's office, the PMO, have emerged. The PMO has dictated votes in the Senate and attempted to interfere in an audit of Senate expenses. Last week, during Peter Mansbridge's second interview on The National, Justin Trudeau admitted candidly that the centralizing of power in the PMO began with his father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, back in 1970. That initial control was minor, but now the PMO is too powerful, too centralized, and too unaccountable. The Green Party will slash the budget of the PMO by 50% and also reduce the government's advertising budget in order to prevent tax dollars from being used to promote the incumbent government's agenda. As well, all contracts must be publicly tendered on a website and decisions made without partisan influence. An independent public appointments commission will be established to curtail patronage. Parliamentary committees must be empowered to discharge their oversight responsibilities and select chairs by secret ballot. Officers of Parliament must have strong mandates and genuine independence. Strengthening the role of media in informing citizens is vital to a healthy democracy. Restoring funds to Radio-Canada and CBC will ensure that Canadians are kept informed by the public broadcaster. Green Party candidates are asked to sign a pledge to conduct themselves with integrity and civility, treat others with respect, and never heckle in the House of Commons. Green MPs will keep the interests of Canada and of their riding paramount and will never be told to vote against the well-being of their constituents. That is, there will be no whipped votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
Thank you. We will amend the Access to Information Act so that all government data and information is made open by default in machine-readable digital formats. In the rare instances where information cannot be disclosed, the individual making the request would receive a written notification within 30 days. We will expand the role of the Information Commissioner by providing them with the ability to issue binding orders for disclosure. We will also ensure that access to information applies to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's offices. We will end the government's ability to abuse prorogation and omnibus bills to avoid scrutiny. We will ensure the Parliamentary Budget Officer is truly independent of the government, properly funded, and answerable only and directly to Parliament. We will ensure that all of the officers of Parliament, from the Chief Electoral Officer right through to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, are all properly funded and respected for doing the important work to help Canadians. Under a Liberal government, caucus members will only be required to vote with Cabinet on measures that implement the Liberal electoral platform, traditional confidence matters like the budget, and those that address our shared values in the Charter. We will repeal the anti-democratic elements in the Conservative Fair Elections Act and scrap the Citizens Voting Act, which were designated to make it more difficult for Canadians to vote. We will restore the voter identification card as an acceptable form of identification. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Russ?
I'm really glad that this question's been asked because I think Stephen Harper's taken this to a whole other level. I mean, Pierre Elliott Trudeau may have been a bit arrogant, but Prime Minister Harper has become a tyrant or a dictator. He's muzzled scientists, omnibus bills. He's done secret negotiations on 35 free trade agreements that were never debated in Parliament because a copy was never given to parliamentarians to debate. He's told the Senate how to vote. One of the things that really irked me was when Jack Layton had a private member's bill called the Climate Change Accountability Act, passed 3 readings in Parliament, and Mr. Harper had the gall to get the Senate to kill the bill. So there's many examples, omnibus bills, over and over again. And the whole idea of muzzling government scientists who are public servants and are really there to serve the people of Canada, not just the governing party. If you think about Parliament too, it's become a joke. I mean, even Rick Norlock, who I see in the back row there, had commented upon his last day in Parliament that he felt that the civility and the lack of clear answers to answers in question period was showing a lack of respect in Parliament. How many times did you watch in Parliament when a clear question was asked and never answered, but always answered with a talking point, instead of having an adult discussion? Parliament is for the people of Canada, which includes the backbenchers, and they shouldn't be muzzled. And honestly, I'm really pleased that Adam Moulton is here tonight, because this is our 5th all-candidates meeting, and this is his first attendance at an all-candidates meeting. So I'm really pleased that Adam is here tonight so that the voters can hear what Adam has to say. One of the things that's broken in our system...
Thank you.
Oh.
2 minutes goes by very fast. Adam?
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the question, and I really appreciate everyone showing up here tonight. It's fantastic, and I also wanted to just thank the other candidates, for putting their name on the ballot. It takes a lot of courage to be able to do that, and so thanks for being here. I want to take a moment to read you just a few facts here about the control of the PMO as the question was stated, so to speak. The Globe and Mail, this is from a Globe and Mail study, okay? The Globe and Mail analyzed 162,000 votes over almost 2 years and found that Conservatives are far more likely to vote independently from their party than opposition MPs. The same study showed that the NDP did not have a single MP vote against party line between June 2nd, 2011 and January 28, 2013, while the Liberals were whipped into conformity 90% of the time. The NDP voted as a bloc 100% of the time, okay? So, and in addition to this, we've actually passed the most amount of private members' bills since 1972. So private members' bills allow members of Parliament to be able to introduce legislation of their choosing. This was things like the scrapping of the long gun registry. This was also things like the Union Transparency Act, where we believe, our government believes in the fact that workers have a right to see how their union dues are actually being spent. We also passed the Employees Voter Rights Act, which gives workers the right to have a secret ballot to decide who's going to be sitting at the table representing them at the bargaining table. And just to also just point out a quick thing about, I know Kim had mentioned about the Fair Elections Act. Did you know there's actually 39 different types of identification you can use? I didn't even know there was 39 different types of that identification. So people are able to vote very easily, and our government is committed to ensuring that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as we get into the submitted questions, your question may not be read exactly as you had wrote it, but we grouped the questions together if there's similarities in there's a same theme or same vein. So if it's not read exactly, it will be part of an overall larger question. So don't feel bad if it doesn't come out exactly as you've written it. This first question is to Kim, but all candidates will have the opportunity to respond. Ms. Rudd, small business is a circulatory system, if not the heart of any economy. Your leader has been quoted as saying your party will increase taxes for small business. Ms. Rudd, would you take this opportunity to put this issue in context and explain what it's all about?
Absolutely, and whoever wrote the question, thank you very much. I am a small business owner. I've owned businesses, I've sold them, I currently have a business, I've created them. I am pleased that Justin Trudeau has committed to reducing the small business tax by 2%. What he has clearly said is that there are holding companies that are created by individuals with high net worth that are considered small businesses that use it for tax avoidance. And there is no suggestion that they will disappear. But should they get a tax break because they're trying to distribute family income through these small businesses and provide dividends to their families? I don't think so. I'm a small business owner. Justin Trudeau knows that. I was appointed to his economic team because of my small business and entrepreneurship. We support small businesses. We work hard in these communities to make sure they prosper. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Russ?
80% of new jobs are created by small businesses, and I think that's the most important thing about small businesses. And I helped, for the past 30 years, I've helped start over 180 small businesses with about a 70% success rate, which I give the credit to the owners and the creators and their innovation and hard work. But I want to say that it's great when other parties take ideas from the NDP, because it was our idea to cut the small business tax from 11% to 9%. And that's a positive thing. So I'm glad the other parties recognize that. And I think that's something that all of us could keep in mind, which is when a party comes up with a good idea, let's share that and support it together rather than just beating the other party up because it's a partisan issue. What we're here for is for the best interests of the citizens of Canada, not the best interests of your friends or just the people that voted for you, but all the voters.
Thank you. Adam?
Well, thank you very much for whoever wrote that question down there. I'm going to read you the quote from Justin Trudeau. We have to know that a large percentage of small businesses are actually just ways for Canadians to save on their taxes. A large percentage. And we have our opponent here, my opponent that claims that she's sitting on Trudeau's economic advisement team, and that's great and all. But the fact of the matter is that Justin Trudeau does not support small businesses. How the small business owners that I know are the people that pour their life savings into their business, that sacrifice family time to be able to make it happen day in and day out. And the fact that the flagrant disregard for small business owners in this is quite frankly completely off base. And we have the NDP that are against big business. We have the Liberals that are against small business. And we are the party that's for business because it's business owners that create jobs, not government.
Thank you.
And further to Adam's last remark, the Green Party of Canada supports small business. We agree with reducing the tax rate for small business. We want to increase the corporate tax rate, large companies, from 15 to 19%. Because they can afford to pay, and we're still competitive with the United States despite that increase back to 2009 rates. So the Green Party believes that small business owners are the drivers of the economy in Canada, employ 70–80% of Canadians, and the green economy, which is what we're proposing instead of the fossil fuel-based economy we now have, will lend itself to small business technology, innovation, product sales, installation, maintenance, upgrading insulation in houses, conserving energy. All those measures are part of the Green Platform. Thank you.
Thank you. The debate cards can only be used at the beginning, as we discussed, when the question is asked.
Okay.
So it's before the responses start.
Well, that's fine.
Okay. That's good. This next question will start with Russ, and it's a question directed to Russ and the party. If elected, will your government honor the current HST rate, income splitting for seniors in tax-free savings accounts? As always, the rest of the candidates can respond.
Okay, so there has been some misinformation circulating, I think, from the Conservative Party that income splitting for seniors would be eliminated by the NDP and the Liberals. That's just not true. So income splitting, just to clarify for seniors, is staying where it is. In terms of the tax-free savings account increase, the NDP would not allow that. It benefits disproportionately the wealthier 10 to 15% of people. And the other part was it
Positive.
the HST? Yeah, we're not going to.
HSE, income splitting, and tax-free
Yeah,
savings.
so we're not touching the HST. It's staying where it is.
Okay, thank you. Adam?
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for whoever asked that question there. You know, I find it humorous at the fact that the Liberals and the NDP claim that they're not going to repeal these things when they continually voted against every single tax measure that our government brought in. We've cut taxes 160 times since taking office, and they've voted against nearly every single one of them. And you know what, the parliamentary budget officer, just to address Russ's point about only wealthy Canadians being able to take advantage of the tax-free savings account, the parliamentary budget officer stated that 60% of Canadians that are taking advantage of TFSAs are actually making a household income of less than $60,000 a year. So it's factually incorrect for them to state that. And our government is committed to lowering your tax burden. We're the only government that's ever stated we're going to lower taxes and actually followed through on it. The NDP out in Alberta, before they even passed a budget, they raised taxes. This is what they do.
Thank you.
The Green Party of Canada would keep the HST rate at 13%. And by the way, when the Conservatives cut from 15 to 13, that pulled $14 billion with a B dollars in revenue out of the Canadian budget. We also would maintain the seniors' income splitting, the sharing of pension income, and we would take the TFSA limit back to $5,500 per year.
Thank you. Kim?
Yes, the HST stays where it is. I have not heard of any party that has been talking about changing that. In terms of the senior income splitting, sorry, can you not hear me at the back? Sorry. Senior income splitting, there's been some misinformation, and I agree with Russ. I think it's deliberate. We have never said that we would take away seniors' income splitting. There have been commercials that say, well, what's next, senior income splitting? We've never said it. We're committed to it. It's good public policy. And why it's good public policy is seniors today are living a lot longer than they anticipated. We need seniors to take that money that they earn, that they're living on, and stretch it as far as they can. Because we have OAS and GIS that become stretched as our senior population increases. So it's good public policy to help seniors keep their money as long as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is directed towards Adam, and everyone will have a chance to respond. Stephen Harper says he is the only leader who can handle the economy and stay the course. How can you assure us if we stay the course, it won't, and we have a debate format, we'll reset the timer to 8 minutes. I'll finish the question and then Adam will begin the response.
Yep.
How can you assure us if we stay the course, it won't be another 4 years of the same fiscal mismanagement?
Well, I would first off start out by saying the fact that that Justin Trudeau didn't know that we posted a surplus in 2014, 2015 of $1.9 billion and continues to live in denial about it. That would be the first thing. I mean, there's a lot of Yankees fans out there that don't want to believe the Blue Jays are in first place, but the fact of the matter is the Blue Jays are in first place. We posted a $1.9 billion surplus. In the first quarter of the 2015 fiscal year, we posted a $5 billion surplus. We are ahead of schedule, and we're going to continue to deliver our low tax plan while balancing our budget.
That $1.9 billion surplus, oh, thank you. That $1.9 billion surplus was made because of the sale of $2.5 billion in GM shares. And so it's not actually about, no, sorry, I'm talking right now, just a minute. And, you know, Mr. Harper, there's been an extensive study done of every prime minister since the Second World War by 2 economists. And it shows that Mr. Harper's bragging about being the best economic manager and the best prime minister economically, and I'm an economist, is, I hate to say it, but it's kind of not true. It's BS, because the reality is, if you look at all the economic indicators, unemployment rate, GDP growth, etc., Mr. Harper was actually the worst performing prime minister economically since the Second World War. So let's talk about the facts. And let's not just, you know, put the rhetoric out there. I mean, conservatives, you seem to think that if you just repeat something over and over again, that it's going to become true. That's not the way it works. You have to actually make sure that you know what the facts are before you state them.
May I get in there, please, just for a second, Russ? Actually, it was C.B. Bennett is who you're referring to in terms of the budget. So there you go. The other thing, when we talk about this $1.9 billion surplus that miraculously appeared, well, it didn't actually. Stephen Harper knew it was coming because it was planned. But the reality is there was $8.7 billion of unspent money in that budget. Our veterans lost $1.1 billion in their budget that was clawed back. $350 million in refugee programs. We can go on and on. It's not too hard to come up with $1.9 billion surplus when you took $1.1 billion away from the veterans. So let's not forget. Let's not forget that this is the second deficit under Stephen Harper's watch. We are in the second deficit under Stephen Harper's watch. Let's not forget.
I'd like to talk a little bit about free trade agreements.
I'd like to just touch base on a couple points here. One, we posted a budget surplus, no matter how much you deny it. Two, your
no one's denying that.
On the veterans, we actually, our government spent $121 million more last year than the year before. You can read the Department of Finance release. That's an increase of 13.5%.
Adam, today at the All Candidates meeting in Brighton,
in addition to this, Russ, I let you finish. Let me finish. In addition to this, the GM sales were actually posted in their 2015 fiscal budget, not our 2014-2015.
It's how the budget was balanced and a surplus. It's about the same amount of money. I know how to do math.
It's separate fiscal year.
Anyway, I just wanted to say that today, in terms of veterans, today at the All Candidates meeting in Brighton, which you chose not to attend, or Mr. Harper told you not to attend, there was a veteran there. There was a veteran there, and he was talking about how his family, one of his family members, was suffering from PTSD. And I had that experience with my own brother from the RCMP, who worked in the RCMP for 35 years. And your government was heartless around the support for soldiers returning. Lots of rhetoric about them fighting for us, and sure enough, they are brave, and some of them are heroes, etc., to go and fight on behalf of Canadians. But when they come back, you don't treat them very well. And you're not providing, you closed all those veterans' offices. You're not providing people that need psychological treatment, the families, the wives, special treatment for PTSD. That's a failure of your government. And I think that
Russ, if I might insert,
to raise the flag all the time that you're big military supporters is just false.
Patricia?
if we continue with the present course, the current economy as it is based on oil prices worldwide are falling. In Alberta, people are losing jobs. Half of Albertans are living paycheck to paycheck. We can't afford to go on that way. Also, the incumbent government, the Conservatives, have done nothing about climate change. We need to address that issue. And rather than a challenge, it's really an opportunity. By addressing climate change, participating in the Paris conference November 30th, setting goals and getting onto the off-oil track, we can grow the Canadian economy because green jobs, the green economy grows twice as many jobs as the current fossil fuel economy. So this is an opportunity. We need to change direction. We need new leadership. We need a new economy for all Canadians.
Patricia's absolutely right. We need an economy that grows. Justin Trudeau has a plan to grow the economy. When David Dodge and Kevin Page both say that creating a massive infrastructure program in this country to get our roads fixed, our bridges fixed, the water in Brighton fixed, in order to put people to work, in order to get our trades going, in order to create jobs, is the right thing to do.
I'd like to
We
talk
know
about these.
That happened under our concern.
I'd like to talk about the free trade agreements, so-called
MP
free trade
Well, there'll
agreements.
be time for free trade agreements. We're talking about balance.
No, well, we're talking about economic management, and Mr. Harper traveled around the world signing all these free trade agreements. They were secret agreements, they weren't transparent, they were never debated in Parliament. They handcuff Canadian governments municipally, provincially, and federally because of these investor protection tribunals that are also secret and override democratically elected governments. That's just wrong, and frankly, those free trade agreements, they're not creating jobs. Our unemployment rate has been stubbornly level at 7%. The youth unemployment rate is at 14%. We've just come through 2 recessions.
So what I would like to point out is the fact that MP Rick
now the
Norlock
audience is
tirelessly brought in infrastructure funding time after time after time. Great example, and I'm glad that Kim brought it up about the Murray Canal Bridge in Brighton. This was a bureaucrat in Ottawa that made a decision to make this to go from a 2-lane to a 1-lane, and is a perfect example of how an elected representative got the job done. That's what he did. We've gotten some of the highest levels of federal funding out of any riding in southeastern Ontario.
So the government actually does create jobs then, because earlier you said that government doesn't create jobs. If you live in Campbellford, if you live in Campbellford, the hospital creates a lot of jobs. That's actually government money. This public school that we live in employs teachers. That's government money. Here's the reality, Adam, around job creation. Number 1, jobs are created by entrepreneurs and small businesses. I already said that. Number 2, yes, there are jobs created by large corporations, and we support trade and we support business.
So why are you continually attacking corporate?
I'm not. And number 3, government also creates jobs. So your statement was that government doesn't create jobs. In fact, that infrastructure money that
jobs
you're
on
talking
taxpayer dollars continually. It's not about creating jobs out of taxpayer dollars. It's about spurring growth in business.
Thank you. Before we go on to the next question, I would ask the audience please to refrain from any comments, any heckling, anything like that. It's disrespectful to the candidates, and if it continues, you'll be asked to leave. Okay, on to written questions from the floor again. We'll start with Russ. How does your party's farm policy meet the needs of Northumberland farmers?
Okay, so Northumberland farmers, a number of my neighbors are dairy farmers, and we also have poultry farmers and egg farmers, and supply management protects their small family farms and provides them with a living income so they can actually stay on the farm. It also creates food security for Canada around those commodities. If we didn't have supply management, we would be getting cheap imports from the United States, and before you knew it, those small family farms would be gone, and our rural economy would suffer and be less resilient. So the NDP strongly supports supply management, and the investor protection agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, that I was talking about earlier, that would get rid of supply management. Now, we haven't seen the text of that because the government hasn't provided the text. There's no transparency. Without transparency, there's no accountability. We haven't been able to debate that in Parliament.
Thank you. Adam?
Well, thank you very much for the question. You know what, actually this morning I had the opportunity to meet with a lot of our agricultural leaders right here in Northumberland, Peterborough South, with the Honourable Jerry Ritz to discuss a lot of the issues that they're concerned about and figure out how we can best advocate their needs. We are pro-supply management. That is a fact. And the reason that text hasn't been shown for the TPP is because it's called negotiate. If you show your hand, you weaken your leverage. This is something that's going on across all of our, across multiple countries across the Eastern Asia. And in addition to this, our government will continue to fight for the best interests of our farmers. And it hasn't stopped us before when we've put through 34 new free trade agreements in order to be able to gain access to larger markets all across Canada for our business owners, for our farmers. And this is what we're doing, and this is what we're committed to. and because our party is going to make sure we continue to have access to this.
Thank you. Patricia?
I believe that dairy farmers are very concerned about the impact of the Trans-Pacific Partnership because they're worried that cheaper dairy products are going to come into the Canadian marketplace and compete with their products if they no longer are protected with the quota system and supply management. Concessions have already been made. We don't know all the details of the TPP negotiation, but I understand that it's not going to be negotiated totally in Canada's favor. It's a big concern. We already have the highest prescription drug costs in North America, thank you to the North American Free Trade Agreement back in Brian Mulroney's days. So one of the propositions from the Green Party is that we would develop a national pharmacare program so that we would negotiate drug costs for 10 provinces altogether, and that would give the government a better chance to negotiate cheaper costs and save a projected $11 billion per year.
Thank you. Kim?
Thank you. Supply management is one of the issues as I go around the riding and I talk to the agriculture community that they are concerned about, because unfortunately they don't believe Stephen Harper anymore. They are concerned that they are going to lose their supply managed farms. I'm concerned that when that happens, to Russ's point, that we're going to start losing some of our food safety. We only have to remember the melamine that came over in milk from China not that many years ago. When we start importing our basic food necessities, we're in trouble. We have a huge food movement in this riding. For those of you who were at the 100-mile diet in Grafton on the weekend, or whether you were at the Warkworth Fair or the Orono Fair, you see the people who are creating our food, who are growing it, who are producing it. We need to protect them and support them. I have a lot more to say about agriculture, but unfortunately in 1 minute I can't, so hopefully I'll get in a little later. Thanks.
Thank you. This next question will start with Adam. Is the PC party in favor of election reforms and introducing a type of mixed member proportional vote?
The answer to that, thank you very much for whoever asked that question. You know, I believe that the current first past the post system is the best form of representation for Canada. Given the response to the referendums and proposals for various types of proportional representation that we've actually received in Ontario, as well as other provinces, I don't believe that proportional representation will best reflect the will of the voters. And in addition to this, there's opportunities for parties to actually appoint representatives for you. How is that democratic? That's not. You would be able to have someone from not your town, from not your area, appointed to represent your area. I don't know how that's democratic.
Thank you. Russ?
You know, Adam, if you would have come to the all candidates meeting in Port Hope on Monday night, which was sponsored by Fair Vote Canada, then you would have learned more about proportional representation, and you wouldn't have the misperception that parties can appoint regional representatives. They would also be elected, unlike our Senate, which we would abolish. In terms of first past the post system, that's a winner-take-all system. In 2011, the Conservatives got 54% of the seats with 39.6% of the vote. That is not fair. That means not every vote counts. The thing with proportional representation, which is very simple and straightforward, is that every single vote counts. So if the Conservatives would have had 39.6% of the vote, they would have had 39.6% of the seats. That's how it would work. And we would have had a minority government, and we wouldn't have to go and clean up this huge mess that Stephen Harper's made over the last 10 years.
Thank you. Kim?
The Liberal Party of Canada is committed to creating an all-party committee to study electoral reform, and it will include everything from proportional representation to online voting to mandatory voting to ranked ballot and everything in between. And they will go across the country talking to Canadians, listening to experts, and at the end of that process, within 18 months, put forward legislation to the government of, to the House of Commons to pass a reformed voting process for Canadians. And we are committed that this will be the last first past the post election in Canada. Thank you.
The Green Party of Canada is committed to proportional representation. We need to reform how democracy works in Canada. We need to assure that every vote counts. We need to draw more women into politics. We need to give youth the belief that their vote counts. Right now, a lot of young people are not voting. A lot of First Nations people are not voting for their own reasons, as well as the fact they don't believe it makes any difference. So voter apathy is a huge problem. The Green Party also supports reforming the Senate so that senators would be elected, and the appointing of an all-party committee to consult with Canadians to develop the right model of proportional representation. I agree with Kim on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question will start with Russ. Ontario has an infrastructure gap of approximately $60 billion, according to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Yet Ontario receives far less than its per capita share of federal infrastructure funds. Will you commit to giving Ontario its fair share of infrastructure funding?
The simple answer is yes. And for the NDP, this is actually a long-term issue, and it's something that's been ignored for so many years with successive Liberal and Conservative governments. You might remember that Paul Martin made the deepest cuts to the transfers fiscally to the provinces back in the 90s to try to balance the budgets, and then had these huge surpluses. Meanwhile, the provinces had all those costs downloaded, and then, I know Hector's here somewhere, and then all the costs, there he is, all the costs were then downloaded onto the municipalities. So that is not a sustainable system in terms of infrastructure. The NDP has a long-term plan for infrastructure and a committed, stable funding source from the federal government to provincial and municipal governments to ensure that they can deal with public transit, roads and bridges, water systems, and all the infrastructure that we require to make our lives livable.
Thank you. Kim?
Thank you. In one of the platform announcements we made in the last couple of weeks was the largest infrastructure commitment in Canadian history. It's a doubling from $60 billion to $120 billion over 10 years. And I mentioned Brighton, and Adam, I wasn't talking about the bridge, which is fine. I was talking about the fact that Brighton was on a boil water advisory for 5 days. I was talking about Brighton, including the nursing homes and the people who lived there were without water for a week. I'm talking about Brighton because they're dumping effluent in Presqu'île in the Bay. Those are serious problems right here in our riding that haven't been addressed. And there are many other, and yes, Hector, is make sure we know what they are. So the reality is we have such a huge infrastructure deficit that needs to be addressed. We need to put people back to work. We have 130. No, I'm not going to go with that number. I'll save it for a bit because I only have 3 seconds. We'll get back to you.
Thank you. Patricia?
The Green Party recognizes the deficit in infrastructure funding and is committed to providing municipalities across Canada with 1 point of the GST or HST, $6.4 billion per year, to be used for bridges, roads, water, sewer, affordable housing, and other such issues that are sadly have been neglected. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam?
Thank you very much for the question. Our Conservative government has a proven track record on infrastructure investment. We've rolled out the largest infrastructure investment in Canadian history, valued at $70 billion over the next 10 years. In addition to this, our local communities right here at home, through Rick Norlock, getting the job done continually, has actually received an unbelievable quantity of infrastructure funding through the New Canada Building Plan, as well as the federal gas tax fund. I know Russ had mentioned about making sure there's a steady stream to municipalities. We've actually already set that up. The federal gas tax fund is actually a steady, reliable thing that municipalities are able to budget and account for, and they have to spend it on infrastructure. Right here in Campbellford, the Campbellford Dam, we invested $8.7 million in that. In the Murray Canal Bridge down in Brighton, we invested $8.3 million. And also the Trent Severn Waterway with our historic investment of $285 million.
Thank you. This next question will start with Kim. Do you believe that omnibus bills should be illegal, and will you and your party support legislation to make them illegal?
This is a very easy answer. We have committed within our policy and our platform to eliminate omnibus bills. We think that they are just a way to hide things so Canadians don't see them. And we have gotten some terrible things through that. I use the example of the Navigable Waters Act, where we had 2.5 million rivers, lakes, and streams protected. And that was snuck into an omnibus bill, and now we have, I think, 92 lakes and 69 rivers, or vice versa, around that. That's a shame. That's Canada. That's our pristine wilderness. And it was snuck in an omnibus bill. Just so you know, the omnibus bills, what they were called a number of years ago, they were probably 8 pages. These are now 460 pages, and they're being rammed through with time allocation, and no one's having a chance to look at them. That is not democracy. Thank you.
Patricia?
The Green Party does not support the use of omnibus bills. Rather, it's seen as a strategy for hiding things, and we are about full, open, transparent democracy. And a lot of the damage to environmental legislation, to scientists that provide information to Health Canada, Parks Canada, Fisheries and Oceans, lost their funding through omnibus bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. You know, our government's actually had the most productive parliament in nearly the last 40 years. This has allowed us to be able to continually cut taxes and reduce your tax burden to make it easier for you to be able to live. And I know Kim had mentioned the Navigable Waters Act, and this is a process that allows us to be able to streamline how companies are going with environmental processes. They still have to go through extremely stringent processes in order to get projects approved, but this is what we're focused on. And it's about making sure that we do protect the environment. I myself am a hunter. There are no larger conservationists out there than hunters, because it allows us to be able to continue to do what it is that we love to do. And our government's actually also invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the national conservation. And it's allowed us to be able to make sure that we are improving our ecosystems, and that we continue to remain sure that we protect species that are endangered.
Thank you. Russ?
You know, Adam, if you think productivity means shoving things down people's throat without discussion, then I guess that's productive. But in democracies like ours, we need to have debate. And omnibus bills discourage debate. They're undemocratic. They lump hundreds of issues into one large bill. There isn't adequate time even to read a 400 or 500 page bill, let alone debate important issues. So I don't call that productive. I call that undemocratic. It's sneaky, it's underhanded. It takes Parliament to such a hyper-partisan level that Mr. Harper has basically pulled us kicking and screaming against that. And what we need to do is we need to have a more cooperative approach. We need to have an approach that would be based on proportional representation, where we would have people coming up with the best pragmatic ideas and agreeing to them.
Thank you. This next question will start with Patricia. What does respecting Aboriginal rights and title mean to you?
Respecting Aboriginal rights and title means consulting with First Nation leaders as equal partners, including them in what the Green Party proposes as a new governmental committee, federal, provincial, municipal, First Nations, Métis, Inuit leaders, bring them all together and discuss, resolve issues, collaborate to find solutions. We need to, if First Nations wishes, scrap the Indian Act and start over. We need to assist them with developing self-governance that really works for them. We need to empower them and treat them as partners, not treat them in a patronizing, childlike way. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you. Patricia said it very well. Aboriginal communities, our First Nations, are the peoples who were here first. We have treaty rights that we must respect. We have our Aboriginal communities in court constantly. I was hearing today at one of the debates, 75% of part of one of the budgets for Aboriginals go to fighting Stephen Harper in court on their treaty rights. That has to stop. Such a waste of money. And it certainly doesn't speak to cooperation and respect. From a Liberal Party perspective, we are going to remove the 2% cap on Aboriginal funding that's been there way too long. We're also going to fund on-reserve education at the same level as we enjoy off-reserve. And I think that's our responsibility.
Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any First Nations people here tonight, but I can tell you that Canada has a lot to apologize for in terms of our treatment of First Nations in this country. And if you don't have to take my word for it, you can read Thomas King's brilliant book, The Inconvenient Indian, if you want to understand the historical realities and the facts and figures. And it's a beautiful book, it's well written, and it's also factual. The NDP will negotiate together with First Nations on a nation-to-nation basis, because that's what they are. They are nations, and we need to negotiate on that basis. Those are the original agreements that our ancestors, wrote together with those First Nations people, and those treaties have been broken time and time again. Of course they don't trust us, so we have to rebuild trust and negotiate to support water treatment systems, schools, healthcare, economic development, and immediately do an inquiry on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls.
Thank you. Adam?
Well, thank you very much for the question there. You know, our government is focused in making sure that we continue to strengthen our relationships with our First Nations. We've delivered measures to help ensure that Aboriginal people have access to the same opportunities and the same self-sufficiency and prosperity of Canadians. Our government spent $1.986 billion more in the 2014-2015 fiscal year than it did before. That's nearly a 30% increase. In addition to this, we've also put in a number of programs, and one of them being that we've put in a lot of money for is over 5 years to support the Aboriginal labor market, making sure that we are giving them the programming, the skills, the development, and the training for over 400,000 Aboriginals. And this is what we're focused on, making sure that they have an ability and an opportunity to be able to participate in our economy and continue to have long-term success on that.
Thank you. This next question came up more than once from the audience, so I'm going to allow 2 minutes for this one, so we can reset the time. And we'll start with Kim.
Oh, hang on.
I might,
It sounds like it's going to be a long question, so I want to take it.
well, it should encourage some quite healthy discussion. Explain why you think Justin Trudeau's plan to run deficits for several years to kickstart the economy is responsible in a time of global financial market turmoil, and while our debt is more than $600 billion, and that's what I expected. It is a debate. We'll reset it to 8 minutes. Kim, you can start.
Thank you. We need a plan to grow this economy. We are stagnant, and I'm tired, and I think, as I knock on, we've done almost 35,000 doors and phone calls. As we talk to people, they're tired of being told we can't be any better than we are right now, that we should be thankful that we're better than the next guy who's in trouble. And that's not who we are as Canadians. The infrastructure program is, as I said, a historic amount of money invested to grow the country. It will create jobs, it will create investment, and it will fix some of the things that we know, in this riding particularly, need to be fixed. It also gives us an opportunity to make sure that we are doing this this is the right time. I go back to David Dodge and Kevin Page, who have both said, this is good policy at this time. There are times to go in deficit. And let's remember, interest rates are record low. Let's remember that 50% of our current debt was created by Stephen Harper in the past 9 years. So we don't talk about balanced budgets.
Kim,
Yes,
Kim,
sir.
you know, the thing is that Mr. Trudeau hasn't released any kind of costing of the platform, and I've read some things today about that he's underestimated expenses and costs. He's already over budget, and he's also overestimated revenues. So the problem here is that, and I was trained as a chartered accountant, you know, when you look at the numbers, you got to make sure they all add up, and you got to make sure that in the end, that you're not spending more money than you're bringing in. So that's why the NDP has basically a balanced budget and a small surplus in terms of our prudence. Sorry, I'm not finished yet. And we need to make sure that we run things prudently so that we actually don't spend more money than we're bringing in. Because part of the thing in the long term, we have to pay down our debt.
Adam?
Yeah, so I guess I would say there's a huge difference between basically balanced and actually balanced. As Justin Trudeau said, and I know that everybody in this room knows this not to be the case, budgets don't actually balance themselves, okay? You know inside your household that you have to balance your budget. You don't spend money that you don't have. Justin Trudeau's plan wants to spend more and more and more money that we don't have. And the NDP have an $8 billion hole in their budget.
Well,
and
Adam,
so they continue to go
forward.
forward.
True, Adam.
Yes,
No,
it is. The numbers have come out.
No,
and so
it's not true, Adam.
we can't spend money we don't have. You know that we can't spend money that we don't have. And our government's committed to lowering your tax burden continually while delivering you.
I think Patricia needs a turn.
Adam, I would ask, how could you say that in the knowledge that prior to this year with that surplus, there were 6 deficit budgets from the Conservative government each year, and you've added hundreds of billions of dollars to the national debt? How can you say that?
Well, I would say that Stephen Harper actually shepherded us through one of the worst global economic downturns.
He put us back in the second one.
And that was making sure that we were able to continue to go through that relatively unscathed.
I think Stephen Harper's policies, Margaret Thatcher's policies, Reagan's policies put us in that precarious position.
Just let him finish the
That's
answer.
the root cause.
And so what ends up happening with that is we've delivered our balanced budget a year ahead of schedule, and we're making sure that we're reducing Canadians' tax burdens. Justin Trudeau's Liberals refer to your tax dollars as a revenue stream. We see them as your paycheck, and we're going to treat them with the respect that they deserve.
I'd like to say, Adam, that the thing about budgeting is not just about the money. It's about the priorities that Canadians need and want. So what are we going to spend our money on? Are we going to spend $40 billion on fighter jets we don't need? Or are we going to spend money on childcare, which has an economic multiplier of 2 times, so that more women can work in the workforce? And if men want to take a break from the workforce and raise children, they could do that too. Why don't we look at what the priorities are of Canadians instead of, you know, pretending that this is just a shell game and all these tax cuts for wealthy people that are only benefiting them, and meanwhile cutting social programs, cutting programs back. Mr. Harper wants to take $36 billion out of our public health care system while we have an aging population. That doesn't make any sense at all, because we all know aging people need to use the healthcare system more. We need to invest in long-term care, home care, farm care, not in jets that we don't need.
Okay, over this side. Okay, just a couple of things. I have actually, Adam, I have balanced a budget. I've had mortgages, I've raised my children, I've clipped coupons, I sold 1 car when I decided to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom. I've actually done that.
So you know.
So Adam, please let me finish, please. I also realize that if my roof is leaking, I may have to take out a loan to fix it because I don't have the money, or I'm going to live in a house with a leaky roof that's going to destroy the value of my home. And that is what the infrastructure program is all about. I want to just add one more thing, Patricia, if I may. I get you're using a lot of talking points. I get that. But I am ashamed that you are using a misquote on Justin Trudeau. That is a talking point. What Justin Trudeau said was, if we create an economy and we get people back to work and our middle class is paying taxes, our budget will balance itself. So let's keep things in context, Adam, and stop using the sound.
Why everyone be producing?
The Green Party platform was announced September 9th by Elizabeth May, and it proposes a fully costed budget with a small surplus at the end of each of 4 years. And to achieve that, we would increase revenue by raising taxes on big corporations from 15% to 19%, which still leaves Canada very competitive with the United States and the tax rates there. We would also increase taxes on the wealthy. 1% of Canadians control 12.7% of the wealth. We want them to share. We want to provide a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians. We want to develop a housing strategy, have municipalities building affordable housing, a national pharmacare program. So it's all achievable by changing our economy, working together collaboratively, and getting off oil.
Adam?
Well, you know what? At the end of the day, the Liberals can continue to live in denial that we've balanced the budget. And we know that budgets don't balance themselves, Kim, okay? You've balanced the budget yourself. You know this. You know this to be factual, okay? Our middle class has the highest after-tax income that we've had. It's an all-time.
I think we should talk about what your priorities are.
We have not cut spending for health care.
Let's know your priorities, Adam. What's your priority?
Year over year. We have not cut funding for seniors, and this is not what we're going to do. We are going to continue to lower your tax burden while delivering you a balanced budget because you know that this is important.
Adam, you raised the retirement age against people's will from 65 to 67.
Okay, we'll reset the timer back to 1 minute.
Okay, I just wanted to drop the line for after.
Yes, well, anyways, this next question will start with Russ. What action do you propose to maintain and promote the tourism activity on the Trent Canal and other Parks Canada facilities?
Okay, so I attended the Trent Severn Waterway public meeting and with Parks Canada and proponents of refurbishing the Trent Severn Waterway, and we do realize that it is an economic driver, tourism, and historical site for a number of communities, a lot of communities along the Trent Severn Waterway, and I do applaud. I'll give credit to the Conservative Party that they are investing, but it's not enough. My understanding that it will take about $4 billion of investment to bring it up to snuff. So the 238 or 236 million that's being committed is a good start, but it's not enough. And if we're going to maintain that canal for the longer term and for future generations, we're going to have to get a lot more serious and more creative about fundraising. And I think there's probably ways that we can do that, where we can do a matching dollar program or other things, but the government's got to step up more.
Thank you. Adam?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the kudos, Russ. You know, our government has been and will continue to be committed to infrastructure improvements. That is why we've rolled out the largest infrastructure improvements in Canadian history. And part of that was Trent Severn Waterway funding at the tune of $285 million. In addition to this, we actually lengthened the season again in order to make sure that tourists can continue to come. There are so many communities that rely on the Trent Severn Waterway, and it actually spans not just in our own riding, as well as the Peterborough Kawarthas and the Halliburton Kawartha Lakes Brox riding. It encompasses a significant portion of our river system here. And so it's important that we continue to support it. Our government stepped up to the plate. It delivered the funding, and we're going to continue forward with that.
Thank you. Patricia?
In this market where the Canadian dollar is devalued against the American, we need to take advantage of the opportunity to exploit tourism, and the Trent Severn is a great tourist draw. It brings boaters from all over Canada and the States, and we really need to encourage ongoing funding to maintain it in good order, keep the season open, because I remember the uproar 2 or 3 years back when the season was shortened. So I'm glad it's been lengthened again because a lot of people depend on that waterway for their holiday planning. And we depend on it, a whole variety of communities, for income from the spin-off stores and businesses that thrive along the Trent. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
And I too, to Patricia's point about the hours being reduced and then increased, I know Rick and I run into each other a lot, and I know Rick got a lot of flack over that issue, and I know he fought for that and got it back. So that's a good thing. It's important when your elected officials recognize that there are problems and they do something to fix them. I am going to, in terms of the waterway itself, I was up in Hastings a couple times over the last week, and I'm hearing about the Hastings Bridge. There's still lots of concern about that. Adam, you mentioned that the money has been spent for Murray Canal, but it hasn't been done. The money has been spent for Hastings, it hasn't been done, and people are waiting. So it's one thing to announce things, but it's something else to actually get the work done. So it's impingent upon governments, as Russ has said, to put more money and more effort into making sure it gets done.
Thank you. This will be our last written question before we take a short break. We'll start with Adam. We welcome you to articulate your party's plan or strategy in terms of the implications for rural and small town Ontario, where about 2.6 million Canadians live. What do you see as the key rural and small town issues, opportunities that will inform your approach to governing?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Our government has continually been committed to making sure that we support rural Ontario. We've done this through our promises of making sure, it's actually one of our campaign promises, to invest $200 million into rural broadband to make sure that we have that connectivity. I've been out to people's homes in rural Ontario. I've been driving the roads and knocking on their doors, wanting to understand, and I'm from rural Ontario, so I get it. They do feel as though they've been underrepresented by a lot of forms of government, because the Ontario Liberals believe that Ontario stops at the 115. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't. I will champion rural Ontario's needs. That is why we're spending so much time out there, making sure that we're connecting with voters and understanding exactly what it is that they need and how we can best fill those needs in Ottawa.
Thank you. Russ?
So in rural and small town Ontario, there's a number of issues. One is an aging population, and we need to make sure that the proper health care is available for the aging population. So that's something we need to invest in. We need a dementia strategy, an Alzheimer's strategy. We need a mental health strategy. These things have been just put aside and not dealt with by the federal government. There's no leadership there. We need to provide leadership for rural communities right across the country around the aging population. Broadband, yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm self-employed. I use the internet service, but to be honest, the private services that we're receiving are not living up to their promise. And I have to wonder what the heck's going on with that, because they're advertising a certain level of connectivity. I'm not getting it, and I'm hearing from a lot of people that they're not getting it. So we have to deal with that. Finally, youth migration. When we lose our young people and they don't come back, that's a huge issue. So we have a youth job creation program and also infrastructure for municipalities to encourage apprenticeships.
Thank you. Kim?
The short answer is jobs. We need jobs in this riding. We are now a very rural riding. We no longer have a city in this riding. Peterborough to the north, or Trent and Quinte West to the east. We are all small towns, hamlets, and villages with a lot of similar issues and a lot of similar opportunities. I have been out, I can't explain it again when you only have a minute, but I've been out working with some entrepreneurial farmers over the past couple of weeks. One in Kendall that's about to create 15 to 20 jobs with a little help, and I was able to help him. So it means getting out there, it means talking to them. But Russ is correct when he talks about our senior population. One of the things we have to look at is affordable senior housing, and that's part of our infrastructure platform. We have lots of people who live in lovely old houses, but 25 years from now may not be able to do that. So we have to look to the future, and we keep talking about the past. Great, everything's done. Let's talk about what we're going to do.
Thank you. Patricia?
The rural population deserves better internet access than what they're getting now, and I believe Northumberland County is taking action to follow up with EORN, the Eastern Ontario Regional Network Group, to get things done, because promises have not been fulfilled. Aging, poverty, access to healthcare, public transit, living in houses that are not conserving energy. There are ways to help people stay at home, age at home, by tightening up houses, sealing windows, caulking drafts, all those things. Half of the energy we produce in Canada goes out through cracks, whether it's public buildings or private residences. And by taking action and working on this loss of energy, we can create jobs for lots of tradespeople in small towns. That's a good place to do some job creation. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the written portion. We're going to take a short 10-minute break. When we return, Mayor McMillan will ask the first verbal question from the floor, so he'll be first to the mic. It's a very short 10-minute break, so please do what you need to do, and we'll get back to it. Thank you.